most marvelous day. Today, as we continue to explore African American culture, I'm still talking about Booker T. Washington, the founder and builder of Tuskegee University, because he truly fascinates me. Today, I want to highlight him from a more personal aspect. I want to speak about his trailblazing wives. Booker T. Washington married 3 times. 2 of his wives preceded him in death, but his 3rd wife, Margaret Murray Washington, survived him. Each of his wives was an accomplished woman in her own right, and each one of them made an impact not only at Tuskegee, but to African American women nationwide. So this great visionary, Booker T. Washington, married women that brought something to the table: education, energy, and insight. They were also nurturers. He often wrote about the comfort that he received from family life. They complemented the work that he did at Tuskegee. Each woman has her own space there at Tuskegee. So based on the choices that he made in wives, we can say that Booker T. Washington was a feminist. And today, we're going to talk about those trailblazing women that he married. His first wife was Fanny Norton Smith. She was from his hometown of Malden, West Virginia. They were childhood friends, although he was 2 years older than she. He left Malden at 16 to go to Hampton. Upon graduation, he came back and established a day school for boys. Fanny was the only girl at the school. She was a very good student, and when she graduated, he encouraged her to go to Hampton. He, in the meantime, was called to Tuskegee to begin his work there. After a year at Hampton, Fanny had to leave because of financial reasons. She returned home, got a job teaching in a nearby town, settled her debt with Hampton, and returned. She graduated in 1882. In that summer, she and Booker T. Washington got married in a small church in Malden. Her mother did not want her to marry Booker T. Washington because he didn't have any money. Fanny was very pretty, so her mother possibly thought that she should hold out for a better prospect. But she chose to marry him, and she came to Tuskegee with him, and he says that she was one with him in everything that he was doing at Tuskegee. He speaks very highly of her, as if a man in love. So they rented a large house, and Fanny set about making her mark. She expanded the curriculum for girls, and she established the home economics curriculum. Now, her husband not only allowed her to do this, but he encouraged her to do it. And this was a time when women, particularly black women, were not making decisions in the workplace. And this is one of the reasons why I say Booker T. Washington was a feminist. He encouraged women, and he allowed women to do what they were capable of doing. Booker T. and Fanny Washington had one daughter, Portia Washington. Fanny Washington did not live a long life. She died an untimely death in 1884. She was involved in an accident. She fell from a wagon and did not recover from the injuries that she sustained. Booker T. Washington was heartbroken. It was written about in Hampton about how saddened Mr. Washington was at the death of his wife. But Fanny Washington, for the time that she lived, made a mark at Tuskegee. She believed in educating girls and making them an important part of college life, realizing that in educating girls, you're educating a community. It is sad that she did not live long enough to see Tuskegee blossom and to see the beginning of what it was going to become. But we can say that these 139 years later, thank you, Mrs. Fanny Smith Washington. Booker T. Washington's second wife was Olivia Davidson. Olivia Davidson was born free in 1854 in West Virginia, which means that she was 2 years older than Booker T. Washington. She was also afforded some of the educational opportunities that Booker T. Washington and Fanny had not been afforded because she was born free. Olivia Davidson also looked white, although both parents were black. This also afforded her opportunities that regular black people would not have had. She was admired by black people because she didn't pass for white at a time when it would have made life easier for her, but she chose to stay in the black race and to advocate for education, for social opportunities, and benefits for black people. Olivia went to Hampton, graduating in 1881 as an honor student. She gave the honor students address at her graduation service, and Booker T. Washington gave the graduate students address. He was so impressed with her that he asked her to come to Tuskegee to teach and to be the vice principal. She agreed. So Olivia Davidson was at Tuskegee at the time that Booker Washington and Fanny were there as a young married couple. Olivia Davidson is considered a co-founder of Tuskegee. She was there at the beginning. The infrastructure was not in place when she got there. So she saw the need, and wherever she saw the need, she did what needed to be done. She improved the curriculum, so she became the curriculum specialist. She became the chief partner to Booker T. Washington and worked very closely together. And she also became a fundraiser. Money had to be raised for building activity, for helping students who really could not afford to come to the school, to pay teachers. So she became the conduit for getting those things done. In 1886, Olivia Davidson gave a speech at the Alabama State Teachers Association, which was an association for black teachers, in which she asked the question, how shall we make the women of our race stronger? She believed that the hope of the black race was educating girls. Girls would educate the children. Men had to work. So it was incumbent upon the women to do the hard work of educating and uplifting the race. So she advocated for the education and the development of black girls. For all of her strength of character and strong work ethic, Olivia Davidson was never in good health. She had worked in areas where people had contracted smallpox, diphtheria, and other infectious diseases. So she had been exposed to those things. Nevertheless, 2 years after Fanny died, in 1886, Booker T. Washington and Olivia Davidson were married. Olivia became stepmother to Booker T. Washington's daughter, Portia, and by all accounts, the child fell in love with her stepmother. She continued to experience poor health, but she did give birth to a son in 1887. They named him Booker T. Washington, Jr. She continued to do her work at Tuskegee, teaching, building the curriculum, and fundraising, but she also continued to experience poor health. She did give birth to another son in February of 1889, Ernest Davidson Washington, but a few days after he was born, their house caught fire, and she had to be rushed out of the house in the middle of the night in a cold chill. She was rushed to the hospital. Her condition worsened. She was transported to Massachusetts, but in May of 1889, Olivia Davidson Washington died. So Booker T. Washington suffered the loss of a second wife, and this time he was left with 3 young children. This was a devastating loss to him personally and also to the Tuskegee community, because much of the building activity and the implementation of academic programs were done under Olivia Davidson Washington. So Tuskegee was in deep mourning after her death. Booker T. Washington had to do a great deal of traveling in his capacity as the founder of Tuskegee and also the administrator of its programs. So in the course of that traveling, he met his third wife, Margaret Murray. She was a graduate of Fisk. She was also a very smart woman. He asked her to come to Tuskegee to take over the position that Olivia Davidson had left behind, and she did. Now, this wife was a little different from the others. She was a little bit more aggressive. It is reported that Booker T. Washington's brother, who was living in Tuskegee at the time, did not like Margaret Murray. Neither did Portia. And apparently, Margaret Murray didn't like Portia either. But this woman was, in reading, I would just say that she was probably a status seeker. She was socially climbing. And he was the biggest catch in town. So she sort of went after him, and she made her feelings for him known. And at a point, she said, well, we don't get married. We just need to stop seeing each other. She played that card. She gave him an ultimatum, and he married her. Apparently, there was some kind of affection because he took her on places with him when he toured Europe. He went on a European tour, and he took her with him, and he took her with him when he spoke in northern cities. She was beautiful, as were his other wives. She was biracial, and she was, had very high opinion of herself. She was also an activist. Now, she did something that the others also didn't do, in that Margaret Murray went after the system. She talked about things that we're talking about now. But she did rub black people the wrong way. She called a spade a spade. She'd be out in public giving speeches about women having good hygiene, about not having babies without being married. She also spoke to the systemic issues of infant mortality rates. She spoke about poverty, about low wages, about police brutality, and black men being put in jail for little or nothing. She spoke of all of the issues that we have always had in our race. But she was also a serious club woman. She was an honorary member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, and she organized clubs in Alabama for African American women. She was a member of the Council for Negro Women and held office in several national clubs. She was a very energetic and outgoing woman, and her reach was much greater than the two wives before her. Margaret Murray and Booker T. Washington were married longer than the other wives. They were married for 22 years before he died in 1915. So they were able to formulate their relationship and to see it really grow as a husband and wife team. She was very outspoken, and that was what distinguished her from the other two. Not only did she speak about the systemic issues of racism and white supremacy, which has always been pervasive in America, but she also spoke about the internal problems within our race. She was concerned about the moral uplift and the moral development of African Americans as much as she was the educational development. But speaking on those moral issues is what got her in trouble with African Americans. She still did it, though, to her credit. Margaret was able to bring the family together. Eventually, she and Portia were able to work out their problems, and there is no record that she was not able to get along with the sons. She was really the only mother that those boys knew, because Booker Jr. was very young when his mom died, and Ernest was only a few days old. So she was their mother. So I would say that Booker T. Washington chose wisely in selecting his wives. Each of his wives brought something to the table, something that could enhance what he was doing in Tuskegee and what he was doing on the national stage to enhance the quality of life for African American people. There's always a debate about him, about what he didn't do, what he thought. He was too conservative, he was an Uncle Tom. I say that he rose to the occasion for the time that he lived, and I will always say that he left a wonderful legacy behind. Those women were part of that legacy. They were partners, they were mothers, they were nurturers of his life. And all three are buried with him at the cemetery at Tuskegee University. So I take off my hat to Booker T. Washington and congratulate him for marrying those trailblazing women.